television show invites you to speak live with Piscataway's Mayor Brian Waller and his guests on the first Monday of each month. To speak with the mayor, call 562-2305. Mayor Waller is ready to take your calls.
Good evening and welcome to I Am Piscataway. This is Monday, August 8th, and we are on the air live. If you would like to speak with me or my guests, please call us at any time during this hour-long program at 732-562-2305. My guest this evening includes Congressman Frank Pallone, representing the 6th Congressional District, Congressman Frank Pallone Jr., and also Piscataway Township Councilman Stephen Kahn. In 2005, Frank Pallone Jr. was sworn in for his 9th full term to the U.S. House of Representatives, along with the 6th, which covers the 6th Congressional District, which covers most of Middlesex County. Congressman Pallone represents the Bay Shore and oceanfront areas of Monmouth County, the Township of Plainfield in Union County, and Franklin Township in Somerset County. He is a senior member on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over issues pertaining to energy, environment, healthcare, commerce, telecommunications. He also serves on several other House subcommittees. The Congressman recently hosted a roundtable meeting in Piscataway on chemical plant security, and again in July came to Piscataway to call for better protection for rail safety transporting hazardous waste material through New Jersey communities. He has invited all township residents to a town hall-type meeting on Monday, August 22nd, to be held in the municipal building to discuss items of mutual interest to all of us. Congressman Pallone is a New Jersey native, born in Long Branch, where he grew up and still resides. He is a son of a policeman and earned his law degree at Rutgers University. He and his wife, Sarah, have 2 daughters, Rose Marie and Celeste Teresa, and a son, Frank Andrew. Welcome to the show, Congressman.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. As always, we would like to welcome back Councilman Stephen Kahn, who was elected to the Piscataway Township Council in 2002. Steve recently served as a very effective council president and now serves as a member of the Council Finance and Public Works Committees. Steve is also a longtime active Possumtown volunteer fireman and is chair of the Piscataway Community Center project. Steve also filled in as host of Eye on Piscataway on a couple of occasions and did a fine job. Steve and his wife Sue have 3 children, Matt, Jennifer, and Samantha. Welcome to the show again, Steve.
Thanks for having me back, Mayor.
And you know, the ratings were never the same since you were pinch hitting there.
Well, we can debate that off the air later.
Okay. Well, with that, it gives me a great pleasure, obviously, to have our representative in Congress, Congressman Pallone, here this afternoon to talk about a lot of issues that are pertaining to both we in the municipal government, but also, more importantly, to the residents of Piscataway and to the greater community of Middlesex and Somerset County.
Thanks,
Congressman, Homeland Security is on the front lines every day. And I know, as you well see, being down in Congress and dealing with a lot of federal issues pertaining to that, you see a lot of what's transpiring at the federal level. But at the local level, you know, a lot of times you come back to the districts and talk to the local officials such as myself and Councilman Kahn about what do we really need, how does it affect us, and why we have the Congressman here. We would like to go ahead and roll into some videotape on a recent visit you just came a couple of weeks ago about rail transport safety, about hazardous material going through the communities, and one of them obviously being Piscataway. So with that, let's go to the videotape. So with that, this is obviously a scene from the press conference here where the Congressman came in and talked about various events, talking about safety as a whole. And Congress, you might want to just discuss why we're seeing a video feed here.
As you know, that rail line, which goes through Piscataway, starts way out in the western part of New Jersey. I think it even goes out to Pennsylvania. And then it comes through Piscataway and eventually goes to Linden, where there's a chemical plant. And I thought it was interesting because we didn't plan that we were going to necessarily be there when the train actually came through. But if you remember, when we saw the train come through, we could actually see that those tanker cards were labeled with whatever material was inside, the chemicals that were inside, and easily identified. And it kind of drew to my attention how easy it would be for someone, if they wanted to do some kind of terrorist attack, to know exactly what kind of chemicals were coming through there.
All they need is a code book.
Exactly. I think one of the guys actually had the code book.
As a matter of fact, Rory Zach, who's head of the county OEM, was in attendance there, and he was able to write down all the codes right there and exactly tell us what.
That book is in all of the fire trucks we have in town, because we need to know, if we're going to respond to an emergency like that, what is in that tanker truck, whether it be a rail truck or road truck. So you're right; it's very readily available information.
And the main thing that the main point you were making, Mayor, was the fact that you want to have, and this kind of goes back to your previous point, that you want the local responders, the local police department, the fire officials, to be able to be notified of what kind of materials and when they're coming through, because you're sort of the first response, if there is an attack. And so that's one of the things. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that basically would provide for more rail security. And one of the things would be to notify the local people so you had some idea what was coming through there, so that you could deal with it effectively. But I mean, there's a lot more that needs to be done. I mean, I would go so far as to say that not only is there a need for local notice, but we need to have efforts by the chemical plants to make it more secure. I mean, one of the things that I think is crucial is that if we know that these tankers are coming through a heavily populated area, you might even try to have them go a different route, because it may not be possible to really secure them.
And let's hold that thought there. Remind our viewers, the number is 732-562-2305. My guest this evening includes Congressman Frank Pallone, who represents the Middlesex and part of Somerset and Union County, and obviously our Third Ward Councilman Stephen Kahn. That's ironic about that, because going back almost 8-9 months ago, there was a rail accident down in South Carolina, where it took almost 45 minutes for the rail freight company to contact EMS, local OEM in South Carolina, so exactly what was on the freight cars.
Right.
Because that determines, Steve, as environment, will determine how you're going to attack the issue with a certain type of chemicals are volatile, and you're not going to always spray water on some chemicals.
Right.
Usually you can't, quite frankly.
Well, the whole issue of chemical security, not only for rail transportation, but just in general, is an area that's been, in my opinion, totally neglected by the federal government. In the aftermath of 9/11, we've done some things better than others. I mean, obviously, airplanes, airports have gotten a lot of attention. I think the London bombing, which I think occurred almost the same time.
Actually, it actually
that
occurred
day,
that
right?
day.
That we were doing that press conference in Piscataway. And in the aftermath of that, we've been trying on a federal level to get more money, back to public transit, for railroads, for ferries. We did something else about ferries in Middlesex and Monmouth County, too, subsequent to the Piscataway event. But the one area that has just totally been neglected is chemical security. I mean, there's nothing now on the books at the federal level that says that the chemical plants have to do anything in particular to shore up their security. And whether it's more fences or it's guards or it's actually, again, an issue of the right to know what kind of chemicals are being made or manufactured or stored at plants so that we can effectively deal with that if there's a terrorist attack. I mean, you have to keep in mind that in our state of New Jersey, I think there are 7 sites where if you had a terrorist attack on a chemical plant, there are over 1 million people within the radius that could be impacted.
And time is of the essence. And I think what they calculated out that it would take, depending upon the prevailing winds, you're talking a matter within a half hour, depending upon what type of chemical, that people can actually be very ill.
And it may very well be that some of the sites, shouldn't be storing some of these things too, because they aren't densely populated. So I don't want to keep talking about myself, but I've introduced legislation called the Chemical Security Act, and Senator Corzine is the Senate sponsor of the bill. And basically, it would require that certain standards be set. There would have to be an assessment of what needs there are, and then each plant would have to meet certain standards. And again, it would involve, securing the area with fences. It might require a certain amount of armed guards. It might also require that certain kind of chemicals simply can't be stored in an area if it's too close to a major population center. These are the kinds of things that need to be addressed. And interestingly, over the summer in July, both the Bush administration and the chemical companies actually came out and said there should be federal regulations, and yet Congress still hasn't acted on it. And I have to be, I don't know how partisan I'm allowed to be, but it really is the fault of the Republican leadership in the Congress, because even the Bush administration has now said they want to move the bill.
It's ironic because we received a letter, about 50 mayors who signed that letter to Secretary Mineta, who's the transportation secretary, actually I believe has jurisdiction over the rails.
Yes.
He wrote back and said that he's obviously always willing to work with the officials, but I think I guess the industry, the rail industry, said it would be information overload for the local municipalities to notify everything. And in this day and age with a lot of the technologies, I don't buy into that.
I don't buy it. And it kind of goes back to what you said before, which is that, when you're in D.C. and you're appropriating money for Homeland Security needs, again, I think the biggest concern I have is what's going back to the local responders, because, again, I don't think the towns are getting that much money, and it should be threat-based. I mean, that's the thing that I keep saying, and a lot of us are saying, that the grants should be threat-based. So if there's a greater threat in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area, which we know there is, because even after 9/11, you've heard about attacks on the Prudential building potential that have been talked about so many times now when we hear about possible threats.
And I know, wasn't it the Senator Corzine, I guess about a year ago, the New York Times did an editorial commending Senator Corzine and yourself in regards to bringing this issue up before it was, a hot issue. And the fact that they call that 1 mile stretch where the Newark Airport, the rail, the chemical plants is like the most dangerous 1 mile stretch in all of America.
It is. The other thing too is that the Bush administration is just not paying enough attention to public transit. I mean, we know after those London bombings that we need to do more for the trains, for the ferries. I mean, I was talking about a week or two after we did the Piscataway event there at the railroad crossing. We went down, in Middlesex we have ferries in South Amboy, and then in Monmouth County we have the ferries in the Bayshore area. And they're actually outside the jurisdiction of the Port Authority, so they got actually no money from the Homeland Security Department because they were outside the Port Authority jurisdiction. And I mean, they have great needs too. I mean, those people are going directly to Wall Street. I mean, those were the ferries that were used to take victims back from the World Trade Center after the attack. And they haven't been able to get any money from Homeland Security.
Go ahead, Councilman.
If I could put on my fireman's hat for a minute as opposed to a councilman's hat. And we've trained and we've had a couple of disaster drills and we've gotten some equipment, but most of it has had to come from our local budget. That's where we really can. I mean, Piscataway's got a great volunteer organization of firemen and first aiders, but that's the federal help that we really need. And it wouldn't be that difficult. There could easily be money in the pipeline for equipment and for training so that we can respond to these things, because as the mayor pointed out, if we had a disaster in town at that rail junction or somewhere else, it's going to be the local firefighters, the local police, and we don't have the equipment. We can't, and we're not going to be able to sit back and wait for federal or county or state people to come in. We're going to have to do something. So I think the message that most of the local people would have, and I know you know it, Congressman, they don't hear it throughout Washington, is that the money needs to really be pushed out to the local communities so that they can be prepared.
Yeah, and I don't want to just talk about money, because I know everybody says, oh, well, you guys talk about his money, but I mean, it is important because, as you said, how can you can't raise it through the local taxpayers and local property taxes. So,
well, if we had to have every firefighter or half of them in town equipped and trained to deal with a variety of different chemical issues, it would probably we couldn't afford it. We just could not pay for it.
Like, for instance, in our town, there's approximately, we want to put a new communication system within the police department to better service all of our emergency personnel, and that costs roughly $400,000. We did receive about $100,000 worth of Homeland Security money because we have a couple sensitive sites in town. But the bottom line is, I'm getting to the point now, I don't have any confidence that the federal government's ever really going to follow through and get it down, the money's down to where it needs to be. And I know Homeland Security Secretary Chertoff was in Piscataway for a training exercise back in May, April, May, And I had a chance to talk with him, and I said that was one of my main concerns. I said, I know our volunteers can get the job done, but they need the equipment.
Yeah.
Well, in fairness to the Congressman, we have gotten some good money. In fact, I know, Congressman, that you've helped us and helped you and the mayor have worked to get some of this money, which we've put to good use. So it's not like we're telling you we haven't got any. You've done a great job for us getting us some of that money.
Well, the main thing is we're just going to keep up the pressure. First of all, there has to be some kind of standards for chemical plants and rail transportation, and the Homeland Security money has to be threat-based. I mean, it shouldn't just be going to each state in an equal amount because
was
the
there an
threats are
issue
different.
that South Dakota was receiving like $6?
I think it was Wyoming.
Wyoming
one of the
was getting
plain
more per
states,
capita than New Jersey,
Yeah.
and yet we've had all these problems. So we're going to keep up that pressure, to try to make the point.
Well, there's a lot of cows to protect out in Wyoming, but
They're important too, but
yes.
we like our cows better, I guess.
Yes. Just a little inside joke there. But no, in seriousness, but I think here in New Jersey, like, I believe me, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the people, the representatives of the chemical industry, recognize that there is a problem out there. It's just a question of putting national standards. And I think that's what it's all about.
I went to a conference, I don't know when it was, May or June, in the state. It was down in South Jersey, where the chemical industry people said that they want legislation. And subsequent to that, they testified at a hearing before the House Homeland Security Committee saying that they want legislation. And then the Bush administration actually came out and said the same thing. But, the guy who's in charge of our committee, you mentioned my committee.
Congressman Barton.
Barton is from Texas, and he just, unfortunately, he just, has some local,
well, it's the home of the petrochemical industry.
people in industry who don't want any standards, and so we haven't moved the bill. But we just have to keep up the pressure.
Well, that's the only way we're going to do it. And I'll remind our viewers, the number is 732-562-2305. My guest this evening is obviously Congressman Frank Pallone, which represents Middlesex County, part of Union County, and part of Somerset County, and also Councilman Stephen Kahn. With that, the president just recently signed the energy bill.
Right. I think he's going to sign it.
Today he did.
Is it
today? He signed it today
Okay,
in New Mexico, I believe.
I forget where.
Yeah, Albuquerque, I believe.
It's on the news tonight.
Okay.
I know.
What does that mean for the average person?
Not much, Brian. It's really not a good bill. We tried to take out some of the worst parts of it and succeeded in, for example, it doesn't have the drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But the problem is that the president's approach and this bill's approach is essentially drill, drill, drill. And there just isn't enough resource. In other words, if you look at domestic supplies, and I've been particularly critical that he wants to now move into the offshore areas, even suggesting doing an inventory and some exploratory drilling off the coast of New Jersey on the Atlantic coast. And there just isn't that much of a resource. And the problem is, if we're going to end dependence on foreign oil, we have to do conservation measures. We have to use renewable resources. And almost everything that relates to that just went out the window. There's no, for example, increase in fuel efficiency standards for cars or trucks.
Well, actually, if I correct, I believe they've decreased
over
the last couple years that the auto industry.
Well, not only that, there was a tax incentive for hybrid cars,
yes,
which has been extinguished. It's not even in there anymore. But we tried to put in a renewable resource standard that said that for the next 20 years, each year there'd have to be a 1% increase in renewables. So it would get up to 20% over 20 years. It was in the Senate bill, but it was taken out in conference. So there isn't any real incentive for, alternative fuels.
In other words, the status quo stays the same.
And most of the money, there's like a $25 billion, windfall, basically subsidy to oil and gas companies to do more drilling in the United States. And I just think that, I'm not saying we shouldn't drill more in the United States, but it's just a limited resource. And I just don't think it's going to do anything for energy independence. And there's certainly no, the Energy Department has estimated, I think, that it'll actually increase the cost of gasoline, so it's not doing anything to reduce the price of gasoline either.
I think what I find amazing is that some of these issues were talked about 25 years ago when I was in high school about some of this renewable energy. And as brilliant as this country is with all the scientists we have, it's never really been a national priority. I know that was one of the things you pushed for in Congress. It's a shame that that's not the direction we're going in. You certainly would think that if there was some presidential leadership and the president said, this is going to be the goal of my next 4 years or 5 years, we're going to get to this point, the country could get to that point?
I think people want to. I think people care enough about the issue that if the president or Washington took the leadership and said, look, we really have to bite the bullet. We're going to have higher fuel efficiency. We're going to do conservation measures. We're going to try to come up with new technologies. I think people would be very interested in it. But he just keeps saying, oh, that's pie in the sky. That's never going to happen. So.
Well, it's interesting. I think if you read the business section of the newspapers, that the hybrid vehicles are going. They can't make them fast enough.
Exactly.
What's going to end up happening is some other country is going to focus on that and pass us by with the technology if we don't get out in front on it.
No,
because the other countries are going to have the same problem, and they're not mired in the political struggle that we are. And so you're going to see the Chinese, perhaps, or the Japanese, or somebody else develop the technology instead of us, which is a shame.
And if you look at Western Europe, they're already, far ahead in terms of conservation measures, fuel efficiency, all the things that we talk about. But maybe there'll be another opportunity. I just don't think the bill is of much value, frankly.
Well, one thing I was very happy about that I know as the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities were fighting for that provision to eliminate a provision in the bill about the MTBE.
Yeah, that was we did get rid of that.
Shaw.
Yeah, that was I forgot.
I
that
want
was
to
another
talk
major
just a
thing.
second about that. I know it's a little technical, but I think it's important for the people to know what that was about.
Well, basically, they wanted to either eliminate or limit liability for companies that had caused the pollution from MTBE. And, that's ridiculous, They wouldn't be able to
for
sue
those members in the viewing audience, that has to do with the gas additive that's put in gasoline for make it cleaner.
Right.
So they wanted some product liability shield. And then I think the oil industry said, all right, they knew they were going to have a hard time through Congress, and they said, well, we'll put aside $5 billion worth of a fund, sort of like the super fund, and then we were still arguing against it because look what happened to the super fund. It's out of money.
Exactly.
And as you know, the mayor was down in Washington and spoke at that press conference. I can't remember the statistics, but I remember you said how much it was going to shift the burden of cleanup to the local.
Anywhere from
ridiculous.
$30 to $80 billion cost shift to local towns and cities across America
to clean
up
the mess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and
the local taxpayers would.
Yeah, essentially that's what's happening with the super fund right now. There is no longer a super fund because we never reauthorized the tax on the chemical and petroleum industry, and so now all the super fund sites, if they can't go after the polluter because they went bankrupt or whatever, the money's coming from general revenues, which means from your income tax, rather than the tax that was on the oil and chemical industry that was used to finance it for so many years. And they wanted to do the same thing with MTBE.
Well, which is ironic, and that's one of the arguments I had made because we've already seen that bad picture show. Originally when I believe it was former governor and then Congressman Florio was one of the ones that pushed that. He started
the Superfund,
which is back in the late 70s, early 80s, was a great thing and proved out to be somewhat successful in the respect if they only had a little bit more money to do and clean up. I know we do have a site in town that's being cleaned up through Superfund, but
Middlesex has the most. Middlesex has the most sites in the state, and New Jersey has the most sites of any state in the nation.
Country.
And a lot of them have been cleaned up. You saw like in Edison with the Kinbook site and the CIC chemical insecticide site. They're mostly cleaned up now. And again, those were, they try to go against the company that did the pollution, and they have the responsibility to clean it up under the polluter pays idea. But if you can't find them because they went bankrupt or they can't be found.
A lot of times these the companies they have no assets left to go after, or there's other large judgments out there.
And then you need the federal dollars, which, again, without the Superfund, just comes from general tax revenue, which isn't right. It shouldn't be the taxpayers.
Yeah. And with that, the number again is 732-562-2305. My guest this evening is Congressman Frank Pallone and also Councilman Stephen Kahn. The transportation bill, I guess there's obviously an agreement now between the House and Senate, and supposedly the President's going to sign the bill.
I think that may be Wednesday, and he's going to sign that. And it was bipartisan. It was one of the few things that ultimately was done on a bipartisan basis. We had several extensions because we tried to convince the President to go along with it, but he finally did. And it's a very good bill. It has a lot of infrastructure projects, not all highway, a lot of it mass transit. And I was telling you before that we already broke ground on one of them, which is the expansion of Route 18
in New Brunswick.
basically between Route 1 and Albany Street. But, you know, it affects people coming into Piscataway as well, obviously. And that actually, we broke ground last week. It's going to take about 4 years, but it's very important for the whole area.
Well, it's the whole transportation network.
Right.
I think that there's like 80,000 cars.
I use it to go from my Long Branch office
to
the office in New Brunswick, so it's important to me personally.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've driven on the stretch of Route 18 through over the river.
Right.
It came out terrific. We wouldn't have done it without the money. And
but now that area where I'm talking about is a sort of a bottleneck.
oh, I know. I've been stuck in it.
That's why you need to fix it.
I think everybody in the Piscataway area could relate to that section by Commercial Avenue and Paul's Boulevard.
Yeah. But they're also going to, the transportation bill is not only highway money, there's also an effort to try to encourage, to make things more environmental. And that Route 18 expansion is a good example because they're going to be bike paths.
Yeah.
They're trying to tie in the waterfront.
There's also going to be boat slips down there.
At Boyd Park. And that's not just for New Brunswick, but also in general. The bill is more environmentally friendly and trying to, as I said, create pedestrian ways, bicycle
I believe there's also
paths.
going to be more monies involved for bikeway,
Right.
pedestrian.
And that's
access.
not just there, but in general.
Well, that's one of the beauties of the Route 18 extension through Piscataway, the project through Piscataway, is they made a beautiful bike path and a separate little bike path over River Road. And you can now, I mean, I went to Rutgers. I know you went to Rutgers. We're all Rutgers people. When I used to ride my bike from New Brunswick to Bush campus, you know, you were taking your life into your hands to get from one point to the other. Now you can do it completely safely.
Yeah. No, it looks good. I saw the design, and it's really going to be an improvement. Now, it's going to take 4 years, so for 4 years there's going to be a lot of disruption there, but in the end it'll be good.
4 years is a blink in the time.
It was 20
especially
years.
when transportation
20 years
projects.
It was 20 years for this Piscataway, I think so.
Well, I think one of the big issues with that transportation bill was whether it was going to be formula driven or earmark driven. I think there was
ended up being
donor states wanted more money on the dollar. I think
Right.
there's a guaranteed rate now.
Well, New Jersey does better. The percentage that New Jersey gets is higher than it was. We were trying to do even better, but it is an improvement. But it's a combination. In other words, some of the money will go directly to the states, and then they choose the projects, but some is also earmarked as well. So, for example, I think that Route 18 expansion will probably cost about $200 million. Most of it's coming from the federal money going to the states generally. But there's about $10 million that's specifically earmarked. So it's a combination. But that project's all federally funded.
Yeah, but that'll be a wonderful asset to the greater transportation system in the area. And with that, the number is 732-562-2305. And obviously my guest, Stephen, is our Congressman Frank Pallone and Councilman Stephen Kahn. We talked about the Homeland Security, the rail safety, the chemical industry, just the energy bill and transportation. I do know after the break when we come back, I would like to touch upon obviously Social Security,
Sure.
which is a very hot topic, and obviously the new Medicare law. With that, we're going to go to our monthly announcements. So we'll get the staff, and we're going to go to the announcements here. And this month's announcements, we had a very short announcement span, and we'd like to wish congratulations to John F. Kennedy Library for celebrating its 40th anniversary this month. Kennedy Library opened its doors on August 2nd, 1965, circulating a record-breaking 1,061 books. Now, I know in this day and age, it's probably a lot more to do that in a couple hours. The Summer Film Festival concludes at the Kennedy Library on Thursday, August 11th, with an English film called Magdalene Sisters, beginning at 6:30 p.m. Free tickets are available at Kennedy and Westergaard Libraries and on the Bookmobile. Congressman Frank Pallone will conduct a town hall meeting on Monday, August 22nd from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. in the municipal building. All township residents are invited to attend. On Thursday, August 25th, the St. Peter's University Hospital's Community Mobile Health Van will be at the Senior Citizen Center for a skin care cancer screening from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Advance registration is required. For information, call the Department of Aging at 732-562-2382. The Health Advisory Commission and Johnson & Johnson Health Care Systems will conduct a blood drive on Wednesday, August 31st in a municipal building from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. For questions on eligibility or to register to give blood, call the Health Department at 732-562-2323. We wish to publicly acknowledge and thank the sponsors of our extraordinary July 4th 05 celebration. They included Applebee's, Edgebrook Properties, Epic Group Inc., GE Healthcare, JRS and Associates, Hauppauge Lloyd, New Jersey American Water Company, PSC&G, Quick Check, Robote Flavors, Roma Food Enterprises, ShopRite, SS White, Sudler Corporate Park on 287, Telecordia Technologies, and Yardville National Bank. I'd like to thank all those companies. Also, the library will be closed on Saturday, September 3rd, Sunday, September 4th, and Monday, September 5th in observance of Labor Day holiday. All township offices will be closed for Labor Day, Monday, September 5th. And due to the Labor Day holiday, the next live Eye on Piscataway will be Wednesday, September 7th, and the August program will be rebroadcast on Mondays at 8 p.m. and Fridays and Sundays at 7 p.m. on Channel 22. And that concludes our monthly announcements. And when we come back, we do have some videotape. Now we're going to go take a look at some of the video events that happened in the township over the last month. We are going to see the Commerce Bank grand opening first, and then you're going to see the Police Department's National Night Out that was held over at the new Community Policing Building on August 2nd. And next we're going to go show you where we are with the Township's Museum, the Mettler Bodine House Museum. And finally, we're going to show you some of the action that took place during the week-long Police Youth Week. Now let's go to the videotape. This was obviously the new Commerce Bank regional facility here on corner of Stelton and Mettler's Lane, and this was they had a big grand opening there. There must have been at least 1,500 people at the grand opening. I had a chance to talk to the new branch manager, and that's the largest pair of scissors I've ever seen. And this was held over at this National Night Out. Was evidently there was about 100 area residents showed up at it. You had participants were obviously the police department, the community policing section. They also had North Stelton Fire Company was in attendance. Possum Town also. Let's not forget Possum Town. We also had some outside vendors there too. A locksmith was there. As you can see, probably just peddling what type of locks people should have on their homes. And basically it was very well received. The residents had an opportunity to go in and take a look at the inside of the new community policing section. Our Office of Emergency Management was there, as well as our CERT volunteers, which is the civilian emergency response teams. And also these photos right here of the current condition of the Mettler Bodine Museum. As many of you know, in town, we had over a year ago we had a fire in the museum that pretty much got at the inside of the museum. Currently, it has a new roof on the museum, which is good news. And this is some footage on the inside. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to begin. The architect's in the final stages of coming up with the bid documents so we can go out to bid and start getting that renovated. But I know that people from the fellowship are very excited about fixing the inside of the museum, because that is a part of our history in our township, and given the fact, Congressman, we're the 50th oldest town in the United States, so we've played a vital role in the Revolutionary War and so forth throughout time. But very tragic, and I know, Steve, I believe you were on that fire scene that night.
No, I was not. I was on vacation, but I do want to point out, Mayor, that our volunteer firemen did
a great job.
Did an amazing job.
Who are you? Sally Youth League 2005! What are you? Leader, sir!
That was a picture of our latest graduation class of our Piscataway Youth training session, and a lot of anxious volunteer youth there. And this is they're watching our emergency response team through our police department do training down at our fire training facility.
Cover your ears. Okay. Now, this is still hot, so don't touch it. All right, let's hear it. Guns up.
These are like the youth
Yes, this is run through the community policing section of the police department. Gives the young students here an opportunity to see what it's like to be a police officer for about a week and the type of training that they have to go through. Fosters better community relationship with the community as a whole. And I think it's a great program that Chief Harris came up with. Very well received, and actually there's already a waiting list for next year.
There you go. Get your hands up.
Hands up.
Yell it loud.
Hands up. You too. Hands up.
Good.
Hands up.
Perfect.
Don't hit my hands on the wheel. Hands on the wheel down on the top of it. You want your hands on the dashboard. You hands on the window now. Hands on the window. Hands on the window. License registration and the insurance card down with your left hand. Put your hands on the dashboard. What do we do? Put your hands on the window. Hands on the window now. What did we do? Hands on the window. Yell at us as soon as you pull up.
Nice. Leave your partner there.
Run, Fazio, run.
We also have a Citizen Police Week
Yes.
for grown-ups,
Right.
which is a great program.
That's good. That's terrific.
No, it's great things that come out of the police department and getting the community a little bit better, closer to the
Your
police.
fire department is all volunteer, right?
We have, I don't want to take credit if we don't deserve it, but I believe we may have one of the biggest towns in the state that's all volunteer.
I think so, yeah, because I went to Stelton that time. I asked him, and I was surprised that it was strictly volunteer.
Guys are, I mean, I've only been doing it for, Mayor gave me more credit than I probably deserve. I've only been doing it for about three years or so, but some of these guys, some of the training they have, the equipment we have, very professional. They get on a scene, they do a great job. 3 or 4 in the morning, they're there. And you know what? At 4 o'clock in the morning, if we have a house fire, not only are we there, the mayor is up, and the mayor is always there too.
Wow.
I never sleep, so what's going on? Speaking of, Steve just brought up about the fires, and before we get to Social Security and Medicare, I want to go back to the Homeland Security issue. One of the things that I'm very concerned about, I know we've talked about money, everybody would always like more money, is that I'm just getting to the conclusion that I don't know if we're ever going to get to that stage that we're going to have all the proper equipment. And that's one of the things I've been taking a look at on the council, that we just don't feel that the federal government's going to be there. And I'm always concerned, like for instance, the county has a decontamination, mobile decontamination, which goes for about $50,000, and they brought it up to, at 9/11, could process 6,000 people in an hour to decontaminate them. But the problem is, you have a town our size that has 53,000, and if there's a large-scale problem, like say in our county, and they only have 1 or 2 of those units,
What do you
who
do?
gets it?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're looking about to possibly have for our own town, which would be good, obviously, if there was another situation in another town, it would be loaned out. But I'm at the point now, I'm just beginning to think we got to really start worrying about it. We're never going to see, what type of dollars you really need to be seeing for this area.
We have some smaller units. and
Well,
they're-
have you applied? Is that something you can apply
Yes,
for?
we
Yeah,
apply,
we
but
have.
as anything else,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
competing with
So many other
500
places.
some odd other towns and
Yeah.
several other states, and
You directly apply to the federal government? For
yes, we
Yeah.
did receive a little
we've
bit
gotten we've gotten money and we've gotten equipment
Yeah.
for it. But
for the
you know,
fire. That was through. There was the federal government one was directly through for the fire companies to apply directly
Oh, okay.
through the fire grants. But
Well, if you want me to help,
Sure.
give me a call or we'll look
Yeah.
into it more.
we are. The mayor is a very aggressive grant writer. He
I
stays
know.
up all hours of the night writing
well,
grants.
my theory
He's
is
either putting
I'd
out
rather
fires
be
or
able
writing grants.
I'd rather be able to see that we put in for the grant money.
Sure.
Because you can't get in the game unless you put the paperwork in. So,
Exactly.
And then you have to fight it out from there. And I'm sure any mayor in the state will say that their town's more worthy than the other. But
Well, if you want me to help,
Sure.
give me
I
the information.
appreciate that.
See what I can do.
Now back to the big hubbub about Social Security. The president back in, I believe, what it was in March.
Early in the year, yeah.
February
Yeah.
talked about, I don't know whether it was February, January, or first couple of months, talked about revamping the way
He's
you and
actually
I
been-
collect how Social Security is going to be set up.
Well, he's actually been talking about privatization for a long time, I think ever since he took office. And what we think is going to happen is that, when we come back after Labor Day, because Congress is now in recess, that he's going to make a major push again for that. And I just think it's a huge mistake. The problem is that, as you know, what he wants to do is take money out of the Social Security Trust Fund and put it and use it for private accounts. And there's several problems with that. First of all, there's the fact that you're sort of gambling with it now because of stock market. Who knows what happens with the market? But beyond that, when you take the money out of the trust fund, you're basically leaving a big gap there. So that I believe, and most actuaries will tell you this, that the amount of money that's going to be available for Social Security will start to run out even sooner than is now predicted, because this money has now been taken out of the trust fund for the private accounts. And so you'll see, maybe 25, 30 years from now, you'll see benefit reductions. So people who are now promised certain benefits, it won't be there. The benefit reductions could be as much as 40%. So I think it makes no sense. There's no immediate crisis in Social Security. The money is in the trust fund to be paid out, for what's promised for at least maybe another 35 years. But if you take the money out and put it in these private accounts, you're going to push that day of reckoning forward. And what we really need is to, see some way to come up with more funding, 30, 40 years from now. But I wouldn't rush into anything. I think the best thing to do right now is do nothing. And I don't really understand why he keeps pushing for these private accounts. It makes no sense.
Let me ask you a question, Congress. If I understand the issue correctly, if the economy grew, if the economy was doing better like it did in the 90s or in the Clinton administration, wouldn't that surplus grow as well, because more people would be earning more money?
Again, I'm trying not to be too political, but the president acts as if this is something that's just happening. The reality is that before he took office, we were actually paying down the debt, and the money was being paid back into the trust fund. And the day when we would run out of money for Social Security was being moved further and further back. But as you know, his policies have been deficit spending. He's had huge tax cuts, which have primarily gone to corporate interests and wealthy people. He increases the defense spending. So now you have this huge deficit, which is all being borrowed from the Social Security and Medicare trust funds. So the day of reckoning is now getting closer and closer. So it's his fiscal policies that have caused this problem, in my opinion.
All right, we're going to hold that thought there. We do have a caller on line one. Welcome to Piscataway. Flores? I believe this is Flores.
Yeah, it's Commissioner Flores from Fire District Number 3 in Piscataway.
Oh, how you doing there, Zuki?
Good. How you doing?
Very good.
Yeah, I'm watching the show. I'm a little disappointed that Fire District 3, Arbor Hose, wasn't mentioned on Night Out when we were there and invited, and also our Councilman Hardenberg was there.
Oh, I apologize for that, Zuki. Unfortunately, I was away with my family that weekend on vacation. I'm just going from the videotape. I do know that Councilman Hardenberg was there, and I apologize about that.
I think Arbor was the lead company
and that's your district.
Correct. That's why I'm calling up and a little disappointed considering.
And you know what, Zuki? Nothing taken against it. I'm always willing, where I made a mistake and didn't mention somebody's property, and I always want to mention the people, the folks over at obviously Arbor Hose do a wonderful job over in that area. And not only that, they're very active in the DARE program.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, my son's watching it, and he was there that night, and the news media was there filming him, and he was watching it, and he was quite disappointed that he wasn't shown or mentioned.
All right, well, you know what, Zuki, unfortunately, like anything else, I'm sure when they were doing the tape, there's only X amount of time to put on there, but obviously there was nothing negative meant in that respect, though. But I appreciate you calling up, Zuki.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And you have a good talk to you later.
All righty.
Bye.
I'm sure now when I see my friends at Arbor and the chief I see all the time, I'm going to hear it from them. I wasn't there.
You're never going to hear it again from Tony there.
Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, so I wasn't sure who was. I just wanted to get Possum Town in there.
No, actually, Councilman Hardenberg actually called
Mark
me up and told me that it was very well, anywhere from 75 to 100 people turned out. It was a very great night. More people turned out than was expected. But you know what? That's all about. It's supposed to get the community together and closer to the beginning. I was glad always, whether it's Arbor Hose or Possum Town or River Road or Newmarket or any of the fire companies or Holmes Marshall that come, and we're always excited.
They're all very active in the community. They all go to all kinds of community events, from the parades, the fairs, the Little League opening, Pop Warner.
How many fire companies do you have?
We have 6 volunteer fire companies.
Wow.
spread out around town, and the town's divided up into different fire districts to tactically respond to calls.
Yep.
Good.
But you know what? Stand corrected. So
Absolutely.
So you get it, what you were saying, I guess, Congressman, before, is that basically if the economy was doing what it should be doing, we wouldn't have the Social Security
No, in
issue.
fact, that's what was happening when we had a surplus. And again, it sounds so partisan, but in the last few years of the Clinton administration, we passed the Balanced Budget Act, and we had a surplus, and we're actually paying back into the Medicare and Social Security trust funds, so that the time when they would run out was getting to be like 40, 50 years from now. Now it's going the opposite because you have a deficit, you don't have the tax revenues coming in, and you're also spending a lot of money, on the war, for example.
It seems like, and again, you're in Washington, so I guess I really want to know from you, it seems like the feeling in Congress is not supportive of the president's initiative. Is
No,
that
I
correct?
really don't. I mean,
I see a lot of
you
them
never
doing
know.
backpedaling on it.
You never know, but I don't really see much support even amongst the Republicans, because the whole idea of privatization, it smacks of gambling with your money. And, people are used to a guaranteed benefit. I mean, it's 70 years. Actually, next Saturday, which I think is August 14th, is the 70th anniversary of Social Security. And, it was a guaranteed benefit. You always know what you're going to get. And I don't think people want to change that. I don't think they want to take the gamble with, investing money in the stock market, and then they have nothing, and then what happens?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, even if they lose the money in the stock market, they're ultimately going to still look for the federal government.
That's what I say. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest argument against it, which is, what are you going to do when the person has no money and no retirement? You're going to say, okay, you sit on the street? That's not going to happen. So the government's going to have to come in and do a bailout anyway. So what's the point? I mean, it really makes no sense.
I mean, all that's private accounts. To some degree, Congress has done that with creating 401ks. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's avenues that...
Well, what we've been trying to say as Democrats, and again, I'm getting partisan, is that rather than look at Social Security, which is basically a floor, that should just basically remain intact the way it is. But we should get the federal government in encouraging retirement savings. And, you could do that. Like the federal employees have what we call a thrift savings program, where, the government matches what we put in. Mm-hmm. And what we could do is encourage companies to do that, or maybe the federal government do it directly, actually match money that you would put in a 401k at the federal level. Because you can't just rely on Social Security. We really shouldn't be talking about that. We should be talking about supplemental retirement.
Yeah,
I think our country has probably the lowest savings rate of any of the
I remember. I think
any of the
almost
G7
flat.
countries.
I think last week, it was like almost flat, the savings rate for the first time. It was unbelievable.
Now, piggybacking off the Social Security, there's about the Medicare, the bill that was passed prior to last year's election. Now, I guess it will become in effect, I believe,
January 1st, 2006. Yeah.
Now, what does that mean to those seniors that are at there's a lot of seniors out there that don't understand it.
I don't think it's going to mean much, and I would say that seniors should be very careful what they do. I mean, again, this was the president's bill, and I don't think there was any Democrat who voted for it. And the problem is that the only way you're going to really be able to take advantage of it is if you're very poor, or if you have catastrophic prescription drug bills. In my opinion, but I would not say to anyone to take my word for it. Just look at it very carefully. If you're a middle-income person, like you're not eligible for PAAD or Senior Gold, which is the state program, right? If you're not eligible for those, you fall above those guidelines, and you don't have any state benefit, unless your prescription drug bills are, like, say, over $5,000 a year. You're not really going to benefit from this, because between $2,000 out of pocket and $5,000 out of pocket for the senior, they get no benefit. So they may very well pay a very high premium per month, and after they reach that $2,000 level, get no benefit. And it may be they'll end up paying more out of pocket than they get in benefits.
Previously.
And the concern we have with the PAAD program and the Senior Gold is that we wanted the federal government to just sign up everybody automatically who was in those state programs. And instead, now they've been sending out all these letters, and I don't want to be even more confusing, but most seniors in New Jersey have gotten all these letters saying that, you can opt into all these different programs.
And that's not the case.
And
obviously.
It's very difficult for, I think, the seniors to really go through all that bureaucracy. So I would tell them, be very careful. You have a senior, I guess we're in the senior center here,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I would encourage them to come down and talk to the people you have at the senior center, let them look at it, call my office before they
we're almost at a
proceed.
point, I think, within the next month or two that we're going to have some type of informational session in regards to the senior center.
Absolutely. They're going to get very confused. And as I said, if they're above the PAD or the senior gold, they're probably not going to find they benefit unless they really have very high bills.
Well, my concern is I don't want to see the seniors taking a step back. If anything, they need to take a step forward in the sense as far as for the benefits.
Right. Well, it's a voluntary program, so people don't have to sign up for it. But I think a lot of people, I'm sure there's going to be publicity and a lot of people, you know how it's like with the HMOs,
Yes.
where, because remember, these are all private plans. You're going to be asked, and there's going to be advertisement to join with these various private drug plans. And it's not a government program per se.
No, it's privatized.
You operate through these private plans. And just like with the HMOs, you don't want to sign up and find out it's not worth it. You got to be careful.
Because as you sign up, you're locked in.
I think the answer is that really the seniors need information. I don't know. Do we have someone in town, Mayor, that
Well,
can
what
do
the
that?
problem is that the rules are so, I think, are still being
Oh, yeah.
formulated as
He's
they're
right.
going.
He's right.
And that's part of the problem.
Yeah, over the next few months, so in the fall, you'll start to see a lot of this come out. And I'm just cautioning everybody more than anything else, that's all.
Will your office put out any information on it?
We already have some right now if you want. I mean, you can contact, I have
That
the
would be-
office on 67 Church Street in New Brunswick, so if anybody wants to,
Okay.
contact
No,
us
I think
there.
that's not just only because we have about over 5,000 registered seniors at Piscataway that belong to the center here.
Right.
And of that, I got to believe that most of them are going to be confused about the program.
And
I mean,
plus
because
in-
if folks or even people that are supposedly administrators in the system are confused,
Right.
how do they expect the people who are going to be the constituents and the beneficiaries
Yeah.
going to understand the
Well, plus
program?
in Piscataway, you have a lot of middle-income seniors, too.
Yes.
And so I think in particular, I mean, I don't want to, and I hate to talk about alternatives, but what the Democrats wanted was to just expand Medicare, the existing program, and have a guaranteed prescription drug benefit. Just like, right now with Part B, which pays for your doctor bills, 80% of the costs paid for by the federal government. You can go to any doctor. You have a $100 deductible. The premium is I think it's about $60-something now per month. So we wanted to have the same thing. We wanted to have a set premium, $100 deductible, 80% paid for by the federal government. And then after $5,000, it would be 100% paid. It would just be a continuation of the government program, but that obviously didn't happen.
That's too simple.
Too simple.
It's always struck me as, and I know you probably heard hundreds or thousands of stories, you have a Medicare program that works pretty well
I think
with
so.
no prescription drug. What's the difference? The old joke would be, the good news is we know what's wrong with you, Mr. Smith, but the bad news is you can't afford the medicine, for the treatment. It just
The other
seems,
thing, too, is that, the Republicans said that what the Democrats were proposing was too expensive. But I feel that if you had negotiated prices, which are not in this bill, that you would have brought the cost down because we could have saved a lot of money by negotiating prices. But they didn't want to do that.
It's interesting about that I read that now the Canadian government now is trying to clamp down on
Oh, yeah.
coming there because they're concerned that a lot of the Americans are flocking to the
Sure.
Canadian house for cheaper alternatives.
Exactly.
And they're worried about their supplies now. I mean, not the quality, but the quantity.
And that really isn't the answer anyway. I mean, we should have our own program. We shouldn't have to go to Canada. So.
Or Ireland or any other countries that manufacture
Exactly.
prescription drugs.
well, and ultimately the burden falls, like a lot of these things, on charity care, people and other local programs, the state programs. We end up paying for those folks. They don't get the medication. They get sicker, and they have more medical bills. So
Same thing like here in Middlesex County or any county, that a lot of the money goes towards that. We don't have that burden at the local level, but at the end of the day, your local property taxes, where the county portion of the county property goes towards funding Medicare individuals.
But Steve, I like the fact that you point to the preventative aspect because ultimately prescription drugs are preventative.
Correct.
If everybody has access to them, it prevents people being hospitalized, going to nursing home. And those costs drive up the cost of the federal government anyway. So I would argue also, not only you could save money through negotiated prices, but if more people have access to prescription drugs the way you said, Steve, then the costs of other health care to the government go down.
Well, and I know you believe, as I do, because we've spoken about it. In this country, we should have the best. We have there's no reason that we should have health care for our seniors that is not as good or better than anybody else in the world. We shouldn't lag behind. It's silly.
No, not at all. And given the fact we're obviously our town is a telecommunications medical industry. We're the home of UMDMJ teaching hospital and the medical schools right here in town. And obviously a lot of people are employed in the healthcare industry in this area, the state, and obviously we're very concerned about the whole healthcare issue.
Sure.
So
you're the healthcare center.
Yes, we are. Not only just New
Middlesex
Brunswick,
County.
but this area. Yes, we are.
Well, we really are. In fact, we would like to encourage more healthcare and research and medical facilities
Absolutely.
to
We
come
would
to
love to have that
Piscataway.
here.
We'd love to have them here.
And with that, Councilman, we're going to give you 20 seconds. The wind up. We're winding the show down. So
I just want to thank the Congressman for coming to Piscataway. I know he's a good friend of our town. I'm looking forward to you coming, I guess, in about 2 weeks or so to Piscataway for that town meeting. I'm sure that there'll be a good turnout. I just want to thank you for the help you've given us in some of our projects in the past.
Well, thank you. I'll be glad to be here today. And what is it, the 22nd? We said,
22nd.
Right? August 22nd.
yeah. No, we appreciate you first taking your time out of your busy schedule to stop off here in the studio, and obviously in the next couple of weeks, and all the things that you've been trying to help the town on.
Well, Mayor, you deal with a lot of the same issues that I care about, so it's easy for
Well,
me.
you know, it's always funny. I forget whoever told us the story. How I think it was Governor Cody.
Yeah.
Would tell the story how when the Mayor's Association, how they wanted to know who higher up they can go to, and then somebody said the mayor to get the pothole fixed. But it's so true because we rely on you as the federal as a liaison for the local level.
Yeah, but you do a lot. I mean, I think the leadership on those chemical security issues and the railroad security is very important. I appreciate it.
Now, with that, we're going to wind up this month's show. We just hopefully everybody keeps nice and cool for the rest of August, and we'll see you back in September after Labor Day. And just to reiterate what Commissioner Flores says, let them know that we love Arbor Hose too. So
We love Arbor.
so with that, have a good night.